in.
She will. She'll chime in. I saw her. Yeah.
Everything I do, she's like,
yeah.
What are y'all doing back there?
So as you can see, everyone, we were just having our own little time backstage, getting ready for you all. So thank you for your excitement, your curiosity, and everything about this much needed conversation. So again, those who don't know me, Tamika Williamson, known as the College Prep Boss, but we're focusing on something that's much bigger, and that's really critical. We're talking about the mental and the mental health of our youth. But when you unpeel the layers of the onion, it's the mental health of all of us. Let's just be real. It's not just the youth, because it's the ecosystem in which they operate, and everything that impacts that ecosystem is going to be impacted. It's like a banana. When you have one brown spot on the banana, what happens? Eventually, the rest of the banana is going to become brown unless you contain that brown spot. And until we recognize, acknowledge what's driving the mental anxiety and the stress of our young folks, of our teachers, of our parents, and recognize and acknowledge this was a problem and an issue before the pandemic happened. The pandemic just exacerbated this problem. So that's what we're talking about, you all, because we have a mental health crisis concerning our young people, and we're putting the emphasis on them because you got to think about just the level of maturity and progression of how we are as a people, from a baby all the way up to an adult. Our young folks just don't have the well, you know what? I don't want to say they don't have it, because these are some resilient young people. When you think about everything they've encountered, you know, but they don't have all the depth, the knowledge, the experience that we have as adults to really deal with it. But yet some of them are really dealing with it better than we are, and we have the experience, quote unquote. But we're going to get started. So bringing back again, I mean, just some phenomenal ladies. And I want you, I don't think we shared this last week. So if you can share how people can follow you, how people can keep up with you, and see all the great and exciting things you're doing. Because this, if you attended last week, or if you watched the replay, you know that this conversation really came from an article, or I call it a segment because it's an article, but it's a piece that she also did on the Today Show. And this is part of what she does. You know, Allison did an article, a segment that talked about the mental health crisis of our youth. And that's where everything started. So we'll start with you, Allison, if you can share how people can follow you, a little bit about yourself. I know we may have some new people, and then we'll go to you, Dr. Jillian.
Okay, yeah, I'm Allison Slater Tate. I am a freelance journalist, and for the last 7 years, I have been working for the Today Show and NBC News. I cover parenting and teenagers and the college experience and college admissions, because I'm also a college counselor in a high school. I have a few jobs. And which is good. They all kind of inform each other. My reporting informs my college counseling. My college counseling informs my reporting. So it's all very good. I have 4 children of my own, 3 of whom are teenagers. So everybody can just send prayers and thoughts. Thank you. I will take all of them. I have a 19-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And yeah, and so you can follow my work on the Today Show at today.com. Sometimes at NBCnews.com. I also write for Grown and Flown, which is a site for parents of teens and older young adults, I guess. No, I want to say older children, but they're not children, and college students. And I also write for Your Teen magazine quite a bit. So I'm kind of all over the internet. I'm very Googleable. And on Twitter, I'm at the handle Allison S. Tate. And I'm on Instagram where I post too many pictures of my children and they yell at me a lot. So because I'm not really good at being bossed around by teenagers. So when they say don't post that, I'm like, really? Because it's kind of my life too. That's neither here nor there, but so you can follow me in those places. I really care about reporting on kids and teenagers. I think that, it's important to have people reporting on them who actually talk to them a lot and who aren't just looking at them as specimens. So I see myself as, embedded in that ecosystem with the teenagers. And
Allison, I'm gonna call you the teen whisperer.
Not my own teen whisperer. I'm other people's
Yes, Kenya said you are a Renaissance woman. Go, Allison.
Yeah, go, Allison. I love it.
As women,
yeah,
all these hats,
Absolutely.
and we wear them well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Allison, we're gonna come to you, Dr. Jillian. You said pray for you with your 4 kids. So let me tell you, we had three grandbabies with us last week for 4 days in a hotel suite. Twins who are 2 years old and a baby who's 1.
Oh Lord, you're a brave person. That's a lot.
I'm still trying to catch up. We're still trying to catch up on sleep.
I was gonna say you did not sleep. Yeah. I've been there.
So I understand.
Mm-hmm.
To some degree. Jillian.
Hey everyone, I'm so happy to be back. Part 2. I love this group and talking with you guys. A little bit about me. I kind of started out as a psychologist, a teacher, and then I quickly moved into being a psychologist, and now I'm in leadership. So I see this pandemic from multiple vantage points in the work I do every day. In my division, I have nursing, psych services, social work, discipline, which we've seen some changes even in our discipline. So just on the front lines with that. I also am adjunct professor, like I said before, at Georgia State University. And this semester I'm teaching about child psychopathology, which is super cool because the pathologies have changed during the pandemic. And I'm trying to educate our students to be prepared for when they get out into the world. The other thing, I've got a book coming out in the spring. It's going to be a children's book on grief.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
okay.
and I can't wait for that to come out. It's going to be what I would like for people to use it as a tool to kind of work through almost like bibliotherapy with a child, because sometimes they don't have the words. Sometimes pictures help them heal. And I'm super excited about that. It's a labor of love. It's about a personal grief situation that happened to my daughter when she lost her teacher suddenly at 5. And so I'm super excited about that. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm real simple, like Dr. Jillian Whatley. If you type that in, it's going to all come up the same way every time, because I am definitely not like jazzy like in that way, creating all these different handles. I'm like, I'll get confused. I lose my passwords too quick.
Right.
So and follow me there. I'm very active on Facebook as well. I post way too many pictures probably of my daughter because I love her. And so I'm happy to be here to talk about this valuable topic today. And we had such a great time last week. So I'm glad to be back with y'all.
Awesome. We have proud moms, proud advocates of children, and we're here to share. Dr. Jillian, that book I think is going to be so timely, especially now. We didn't really talk about grief. Actually, that was one of the points I have that I'm going to do a recap on. But I think about one of my friends, one of my scholars. Not only did they lose family members, key family members, but he plays football. He lost teammates. He lost schoolmates. And you think about the level of loss our kids are encountering. It's just like, it's at a whole nother level. And it's like, how do you help them? Because last week we discussed the challenge with getting help, the availability of help.
Yeah.
We don't have enough counselors out here to meet the demand of those who's seeking help. And I don't even know if you saw it, but I tagged you on a post. Somebody was asking for a counselor just after our session, like a day later. Anybody know of a counselor who specializes in young men? Because I need one immediately. So right. People are asking for help, but we don't have the resources. So this is part of what we talked about. It was so many layers, but that's part of what we talked about last week. Because the reality is our kids have been under pressure. Because as I mentioned earlier, there was an issue before COVID hit. When COVID hit, it just basically took it to a whole nother level.
Right.
So kids are under pressure with symptoms of anxiety and depression more than we ever have seen. And in many cases, it's basically double, but the resources have shrunk. So it's like, how do we deal with this crisis? In your segment, Allison, it said 140,000 plus children in the U.S. lost a parent, a grandparent, or a caregiver. I just shared in my example, many of them have lost more than that. They've lost friends. They've lost teachers. In your case, Dr. Jillian, there's been teachers and coaches, and these kids grieving. And we talked about that school situation with the 17-year-old who lost her life to COVID, and the school didn't think it was a good idea to cancel school and bring in grief counselors. Like, really? Is that what we're doing right now? And I mean, in your segment, Allison, you also talked about, the segment also talked about how emergency room visits, suicide attempts.
Yeah, astronomical, like the hospitalizations and ER visits for suicidal ideation and for suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
God.
I mean, actually, this week, after the show, I got a call about an adult needing to be placed in a place because they were trying to commit suicide, and it's very real, and it's every day. Every day I'm getting a text message from someone to refer somebody because this place is booked up. You don't have this. I have just a running record of resources right now.
We could do an entire show on how the system is broken for people who need emergency help. And I mean, you can call 911, you can have a teenager hospitalized, but then what? Like after those 48 to 72 hours, then what?
Then what?
And then what for somebody who doesn't have tons of resources financially? It is incredibly expensive to get therapy, especially really good therapy. And if you're not well resourced, and even if you are, it's still hard. The hardest thing in the world for a parent to turn their fragile child over to strangers and not be in the room and not be in the hospital. Like, you're not allowed to be there. And that is a really big deal. Our systems are broken for our mental health for treatment in this country, especially for young people.
Especially for young people, absolutely. And then for those who have diagnoses, even until their young adulthood, it's hard to find services for that age group too. I know here in the state of Georgia, other mental health professionals, including myself, we get so frustrated sometimes because we're like, some of these kids who have significant issues are then living with their parents. I have one child a couple of years ago, aged out of P-12 education. There was nowhere for him to go. His mom just created a space for him in the basement. That's no way to live. And they had the resources, they had money, but there was nowhere for them to put him. Because
it's a very real problem.
That's a very real problem. Some places don't take certain types or profiles of children because of their behaviors. So, but
yes, behaviors. Like behaviors exclude you from getting treatment. Like what? How does that work? And where do you go? And also, when you're the parent of a teenager, when you have a 2-year-old with a problem, you go to all your parent friends and you say, I have a problem. Like, what do I do with this 2-year-old? When you have a 16-year-old, it's a completely different story. You don't just go around and tell people my 16-year-old is in crisis.
Absolutely.
It's a totally different way of sharing. It's extremely isolating for the child. It's extremely isolating for the parents. It is something that you keep hidden.
Absolutely.
And it is really bad.
Let's talk about that piece, because I wrote that down because that's another part of the problem. There's a great need for us to normalize the words, I need help. My child needs help. I'm
Right.
asking for help. I'm in crisis mode. I need a therapist. I want to see a therapist. It's okay to see a therapist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We
Yeah.
still live in a society where, to your point, Allison, the older you get, yeah, you're going to be more isolated because you're afraid of, what are they going to think about me?
Yeah.
What are they going to say about me? How are they going to ostracize us possibly from the family? How are they going to castigate my child? I mean, all those things start
And
running.
the reality is, oh, I'm sorry, Tamika, I didn't mean to cut you out, but the reality is that sometimes those behaviors have happened where people have reached out for help. And I've known some psychologists to say some very not nice things to parents, like your child is about as smart as a French fry type of things. Oh, I mean, we have come now in the field of psychology from the medical model to much more humanistic. And so there's years of almost this kind of cold bedside manner in terms of dealing with folks. Positive psychology recently emerged like in our recent time. That wasn't before. And so there's sometimes this trauma that's been carried over from even people who want to get help because of how it's been received, not only by the public or the school, but by their own families, because some folks will just sit you in the corner and ignore you.
Yeah.
Oh, Tamika?
I don't know where Tamika went.
Look, you and I.
Well, it's just us now. I was going to say, Yetta made a comment about the fact that schools can't remove demands on teachers, and that means that there's no space for parents and families to be able to support their students. And that's true. And that is part of the problem. That's one of the biggest problems right now, I think we talked about last week, is that there is no space to be sick or to even be sick. Like,
right.
There's no space to even have COVID. Like, you have to go back to school, you have to go back to work. You can't be sick. Yeah. That's an American problem, by the way.
And that's so much. And it's a fundamental issue in American culture that we are communicating through our policies. Don't take care of yourself. Like, even with the shortened quarantine for CDC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all about getting back to work because we live in a capitalistic society. So it's almost like I'm being told to put myself second, right? So then you become your best advocate. Yeah. And sometimes that's not favorably looked upon within certain organizations. I need to take a break is seen as what? Weak. Mm-hmm. I'm taking a sick.
That message very much comes across to the teenagers.
Absolutely.
I was telling you before we started the show, my friend's teenager was exposed. She works in a childcare and a gym, and the gym is saying, you need to come in anyway. If you're vaccinated, we're not having you quarantine. You come in and work with these babies who haven't been vaccinated. And she's like, I was directly exposed to Omicron, like directly. And they don't care. And what message does that send our young people? Like, what message did that send?
Absolutely.
That is part of the sickness, is that we are sending them the message that we can't be sick. We don't have space to learn social and emotional learning. We have to keep plowing ahead because, oh my God, what if we lost some learning time? Who cares? Like it's not, this is not about how well you learn calculus. This is how well you learn to be a human and an adult in this society so that we can do better what we're doing right now, because we're not doing so well.
No, we're not, because that makes me think about the young man, I think it's Adam, that you wrote about, where he said, basically at the end of the day, he's a college-bound student. You have to choose whether or not it's between schooling your health.
Yeah.
Child, why do our children have to be subjected to such a decision?
Absolutely.
It is. I mean, absolutely. And Kate said, when parents are ashamed, they can be defensive. It's true. And therapists have said horrible things to parents. Parents also therapists have shamed parents, but also school administrators have shamed parents. And, there's all this blame going on. And really what we really need to do is just say, we have all been put in an impossible and horrible situation. All of us are going through a pandemic. Nobody is just sitting on the sidelines. And we have to give everyone space to say, I am going to believe that you're doing the best you can, and I'm just going to support you and help you do better, because we need each other to get through this. And instead, we're like siloing everybody. teachers are in one corner and administrators are another. And when I write about these things, like when I wrote about the teenagers, what I heard in comments from even my friends was, well, middle schoolers have it worse. Elementary school students have it worse. Well, teachers have it worse. Well, administrators have it worse. Well, think about the class of 2020. No, 21 had it worse. No, it doesn't matter who had it worse.
Right.
We've all gone through it. And so I'm like,
Right.
yeah, this article was focusing on high school students. I could write a whole other article on middle school, a whole other article on college students.
Right.
There's
Because the issues are going to look different. The issues are going to look different at each grade band. Yeah, you're right. I think we get into this narrative of comparing.
Yes.
And it's such it takes us down a slippery slope, even just outside of the pandemic. And it almost makes it seem as though my situation is so much worse than yours, Allison. Right. So now all the attention has to be on me. So it's almost like this egocentric mindset that's undergirding those comments, right. Because an elementary school age child having challenges during a pandemic, it doesn't take away from when a middle school or high school, a parent and administrator, everybody's going to have a challenge. Why can't we just say we're all in it together? Because we say that, right? Oh, we said that. That was a good tagline at the beginning. We're all in it together. I heard people say extending grace. And we're still reverting back to some of those older behaviors. We are not really pivoting and we're not really changing, even in terms of how we as leaders should be leading through this pandemic. You know,
it's hard to lead when you're grieving, right? And we're all grieving. Like we're all grieving something from the past 2 years. We've all lost things. And I think that we have to find like our better selves to be able to say, I am grieving and I'm going to pause for a minute and become the leader that needs to be in this situation so that I can help get us out of this. Because if none of us do that, then we're not getting out of this. And I'm tired of learning Greek alphabet letters. Like I want to be out of this variant thing. I want to be done. I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to get more shots. I don't want to do all these things, but I'm going to, because my children have lost years of their lives they're never getting back. Your children have lost years of their lives they're never getting back. I'm not getting any younger. Like we all have to like say, okay, it's enough. Like, let's just do what we have to do, but also not say, do what we have to do. And at the same time, act like nothing is going on in our schools, because our kids need to realize that, yes, we understand they are going through something abnormal. And this is abnormal.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tate said we're all drowning, and Yetta, she's an educator. I know she talked about the struggle in another comment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Teachers and administrators are in, but she just said we're all in the same storm, but some are in a paddle boat,
mm-hmm.
others are in a yacht, and mm-hmm. that's where the problem comes in. The yacht folks are as compassionate to the paddle boat folks. So
yeah,
the levels, the classism sometimes is definitely
absolutely. Absolutely. But here lies the infrastructure of how our society is built, right? Yeah. I mean, we want to be real about it. It's built on classism, racism, sexism. And so you dump other things on top of that, then of course, certain people are going to be more privileged in certain areas and are going to fare well than others because of the infrastructure that we've created. Yeah. You know, we already knew the poor kids were. Yes. We already knew that when they went virtual, they weren't going to have hot spots. We knew that. Why didn't we prepare for that better? Why didn't we? Yeah.
Denial syndrome. It's kind of like and I hate to use this analogy, but I think about people who have addictions. You have to acknowledge you have an addiction first. It's like, I don't have a problem. There's nothing wrong with me. So I don't need help. And that's what we did. It was like, oh, this is nothing. This is really not a pandemic. People just, they're overstating it. They're just overreacting, being dramatic. So we can just make temporary steps because we don't need to do all that other stuff. Because that's gonna cost money. We need to get hotspots and make everything available and accessible. That's gonna cost money. We don't want to spend that. Let's wait to make sure it really is real before we do that.
And I think we're in this spot now. We were just talking about it before we went live, where those of us working in education are at this moment having to decide what is going to happen in the next month, because I'm in Florida, you're in Georgia, everyone has COVID right now. And we don't even know about the people who are home testing or who aren't testing who have COVID. And we're wondering, like, do we go back to school? We can't not open school because we know what happens when we don't open school.
Right.
If we go to school, do we say, okay, now everybody has to wear a mask again? Because in Florida, there hasn't been mandatory masking for the past 6 months. And if they are masking, are they wearing their mask correctly? Are they coming to school? Like, do they even have masks anymore? And, how do we know if they're sick or not? And we can't make them test. We can't do. There's like so many questions, and I don't know what the answers are, honestly. And on Twitter this week, there was a lot of discussion because after our presentation last week, the New York Times actually wrote about this subject this week, which I will say, I don't get to scoop the New York Times very often, but I did scoop them on this, and I just like that. But they interviewed administrators and went to a school in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where one of the administrators talked about how there were high school students playing Duck, Duck, Goose because they missed all those developmental milestones, and they're like looking for connection, and talking about all the behavior issues and things like that. And I think that this has come up a lot in the past week. But on Twitter, we talked about, like, I had an educator jump in on a thread that I was in, and he said, well, what do you want us to do? Like, what should we do? Do we not open schools? Do we open schools? How do we protect our teachers? How do we protect our kids? How do we protect our teachers who have kids at home, who aren't vaccinated, who are too young? Like, there are so many moving parts. And honestly, I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know that the answer starts with acknowledging that there's a problem and acknowledging to our young people that we understand there's a problem and that none of this is ideal. Because when they come and ask, why are we not doing more? I want to have an answer for them. Like, what are we doing?
But Allison, and Dr. Jillian, is it really a problem? Because I can hear this argument. When I saw the headline, I was just like, okay, stop feeding this type of information, because it's going to give them other stuff to come back with. So what if the person is feeling, because I'm sure they're saying it's really not that big of a problem. That Omicron, although it's highly transmissible, but it's not as deadly. It has smaller hospital encounters than Delta. So when you look at it, it's really not that bad. So really that bad?
Right. And so what, as for us, part of our conversation this morning, can you hear me out, Tamika? Okay. So part of our conversation this morning is we still have a segment of children who are not vaccinated. They're like, I believe 5 and under, like our early childhood students, they are not vaccinated. So yes, they're still at risk.
And many of the kids who are eligible for vaccination are not vaccinated.
And then that's what I was about to get to too. Then the ones who are eligible are not vaccinated for whatever reason. Either their parents don't want them to get vaccinated, either they don't believe in vaccinations, or they don't have access to vaccines or even testing. Then you got this other bucket of adults who oftentimes just, we've taken this liberty, some of us, to just say, oh, it's just a minor cold. Well, here's the thing. When we compare COVID to the flu doesn't have the long-lasting effects that COVID has had. COVID has ripped some people's bodies apart. A lot of people have passed away from COVID. Yes, people do pass away from the flu, but this seems to be very different. We have to admit that. And so vaccinated folks, yeah, you're going to be okay. I mean, that's what the data is showing us. Most of the people in the hospitals are the ones who are unvaccinated. And that's a fact. We're not going to go around that and spin that any other way. That's the fact. Is most of the folks that are hospitalized and who are not doing well are ones who are unvaccinated.
Yes. And Kenya says working in healthcare and seeing demand, it's still bad. That is, there are a couple of different factors here. And one of them is that our hospitals are still being strained. Our healthcare workers are at the end of their ropes to begin with. They've been through 2 years of hell, and they are not up for another round of this. And also elective surgeries and cancer treatment. And, all of these, like all the normal natural disasters that go on in our bodies, there are not spaces at these hospitals because of the strain on our healthcare system. And that is a real huge problem. And the other part of that is that even though it is just a cold, for most people, for young people, I personally know 3 teenagers whose brains are not the same after COVID, who have almost died, who have coded several times, who have long hauler COVID, and their neurological symptoms, even almost a year later, are life-changing. And
Absolutely.
that is, you don't get to tell who's going to have that and who's not. It's like playing roulette. So why would we put people in the line of fire for that, especially teenagers and young people? And the loss of taste and smell that some of these people have had for almost a year, if not more, debilitating.
It is. And it's so sad that loss of taste and smell. The young lady was talking about it on Facebook. She loves to cook, and just now not to be able to cook for her children or even know when something is burning. She can't tell that. And it's been a year. So now, and she says she was confessing that, now she's anxious and she's depressed. When mealtime comes around, she has about 5 kids, and she's trying to feel her way through without taste or smell. So the flu doesn't do that. Yeah. A little cold doesn't do that. Eventually you get better. So this is something that's very different. That's why we're calling it a pandemic. And this is and we should treat it as such. It is an emergency. But, you're right, Tamika, there's a whole group of people out there that are like, oh, it's just a cold. And, the logic behind that. And then people don't want you to really impose rules or policies on their freedoms. My rights end where your nose begins. And there is a social responsibility for me as an individual to care about you, Allison, and Tamika. So while COVID may not affect me the same way, because I care for you, I'm going to wear my mask. Because I care for you, I'm going to make sure I get tested. Because I care for you, I'm going to do what it takes to keep you safe. Not only myself, but what happens, again, I talk about these underlying things that are in our country. We are a selfish nation because other places are getting it right. They're doing better. Other places are doing right. In America, we have the pseudo freedom. We have the pseudo independent, I'm just, it's all about me kind of mindset. So then somebody just said it, very selfish. So if you're starting from the premise of being selfish, then of course your behaviors are going to look like such. We're not selfish people. So for us, okay, a mask may be, I've gotten jazzy with my mask now, but who wants to wear it? Yeah. But if it's going to keep people safe, I'm going to do it,
Absolutely.
And I mean, the question is, what does all of this, if this is what adults are all talking about, then what does all of this come down on the kids as? And I think that, when kids are little and you are learning how to be a parent, one of the things you learn is that kids need parents. They need somebody to be setting boundaries and to be setting structures because it makes them feel safe. And I think that for the past 2 years, and honestly, let's be honest, before that, it felt like nobody was setting boundaries. Nobody was creating those structures that made them feel safe. They felt like they were in free fall, but they really felt like they were in free fall for the past 2 years when everything that they thought was like an absolute in life, like you go to school and there are teachers there and, people are safe and there are rules that everybody follows. None of that has happened for the past 2 years. So I think that one of the things that is affecting the kids is that they are coming to school feeling like there are no grown-ups. Like there are no structures, there are no boundaries. And then what is the point? Like, what are we all doing here? Like, why does it matter what grade I get on this test? Why does it matter if I fail this class? It doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah. And because I thought it was interesting. I didn't think about it like this until we discussed it last week. Well, you presented it in your segment. The last year of normalcy, still putting quotes around that. The last year of normalcy. So current seventh graders, last year they had a normal year was at 4th grade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And high school seniors, it was 9th grade. And 9th graders, it was 6th grade. And that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
It's a lot of things to miss. It's a lot of everyday milestones. It's the learning how to get over a crush that doesn't like. It's learning how to get embarrassed and come back to school the next day and like get through it. And it's a lot of like the school dances and the the games. It's whole season sports that these kids have missed, and those are like milestones and steps and just the things that you have to do to develop your brain that they're just not. They just don't have. And
absolutely. And who's going to teach them now? Are we making intentional steps to kind of take time to teach them while we're doing the academics? That is important. But the most successful people are not just smart people, they are emotionally intelligent too, as well. And so we have to do the both and academics plus social emotional learning, not just focus so much on the academics, because our babies have missed out on those milestones.
Yeah, we've seen, and I know we had talked about some of the behavioral stuff, but we've seen, I mean, obviously huge increases in fighting and physical violence in the schools, tons of cheating. And to some extent, I think that while they were home and they were trying to get through online learning, cheating didn't seem like cheating. It seemed like this is what I have to do to get through this.
Absolutely.
Now that we're back in a classroom, where's the line? Like, what is survival and what is like, no, you really have to go back to this and this is how it's done. And we have kids who really don't understand plagiarism, who really don't understand what's not. And to some extent, that's because the past 18 months, like they haven't been in a classroom with a teacher to kind of coach them through all of that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then that is impacting their confidence level in themselves, their abilities. Hey, am I really, maybe I'm not smart enough.
Oh yeah.
To become a doctor, which was my lifelong dream until the pandemic hit. And I've had to encounter virtual learning. In virtual learning, my grades have tanked. So maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was.
Well, and I had interviewed a senior who, I think I put that quote in the story. I had so many quotes that didn't make the final story, but the senior I interviewed from rural Tennessee, who is valedictorian of his class, he said, I have so many friends who have changed like what they plan to do with their lives based on the last year. Like they're not good at math anymore because they just missed a year of math. Of course, they're still good at math. Like if you have a math brain, you have a math brain, but they missed a year of instruction. And he's like, they failed things or they feel so behind and they just feel like they can't do it. I know kids who are at Princeton who were going to major in physics and now they're not majoring in physics anymore because they couldn't take physics classes online last year and survive. Yeah. This is changing their whole life. And that's an identity crisis that they weren't prepared to have at this moment.
Absolutely. And then also we've got to be mindful, even within our systems, to create alternative paths for children. Some students are, becoming more vocal about not really wanting to go to college. That's not the option for them. When I met a couple of weeks ago with our student advisory panel, that's something they really talked about. And these are, students who are academically astute, but they're just looking at life very different. And who's sitting down having these conversations with them to help them plan differently for their own careers, and are our counselors equipped to have those conversations, which is some conversations we're having within our school district. Like, do we need to provide the folks that are supposed to be having these conversations with our students with more training now that this pandemic has occurred, because the issues are different. Kids are coming in with different types of concerns about their career and their post-secondary education.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have to look at, I'm going back to last week, we talked about the kids said, I just want to be seen and I want to be heard.
Yes.
And that's part of us recognizing us as adults and the people in charge, not only in an atmosphere where they are seen and heard, but listening to them and taking the necessary steps. Because when you talk about the alternative paths, I think that was something we've been talking about for a while that was needed, but it's so much now. But it needs to have a layer of that emotional learning tied to it. Because now we essentially have our traumatized kids to understand and learn how to do life. Just like with the parents, they have to learn how to parent post-pandemic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's hard when
how do we
at once, Sorry. There's a lag or glitch or something. I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. Something's going on. They interrupt our.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Allison.
I agree with you, and I think that there are a couple of things there. One is I'm having to be very purposeful and intentional when I'm in a classroom or when I'm talking to my groups of seniors or my groups of juniors, instead of just coming in and just launching into more college stuff or more like, where are you with your apps? Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? I've stopped and said, like, how are you doing? Like, how are you? Are you okay? And they're like, no, we're not okay. We're very stressed out. Because they, like I said last week, they will tell you. I mean, they're very honest, and they're if you ask them, that they're not really good about telling you if you don't ask them. So you do have to ask them. I think that they feel otherwise they have to be stoic. They're like, my dog broke his leg and we didn't know it for like 2 weeks because dogs are stoic. Dogs are not going to know how much pain they're in. Teenagers are stoic too. They try. We think they're super emotional. If we can only see what's going on underneath that, it's a storm. And you have to tell them that you want to hear it for them to tell you. The other part of that is that I think that, what Dr. Jillian said at the beginning about, or maybe it was you, Tika, one of you said something about how teenagers don't have something that we have. We have just more life. Like, we've been through hard things and we've come on the other side and we can look back on them. But our teenagers, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened to us, but we've seen that there are cycles in life. Like, we know all the words to "We Didn't Start the Fire," or at least I do, because Billy Joel and Gen X. But my kids don't know all the words to "We Didn't Start the Fire." And to them, this is just, the world is falling apart, right? Mm-hmm. They haven't been through a cycle. So I think that that's the other thing, is to remember their opinions on some of these things are just as valid as ours, because we've never been through this before. And they're like giving opinions. They're valid. And I think that we're too fast to say, yeah, but you don't know, like, we know more because we don't. And no, we don't. I couldn't have told you this is where we were going to be a year ago.
Absolutely. And we need to bring them to the table when we're making decisions.
Yeah, give them a voice. Give them a voice in decisions. Ask them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Like, do you want to wear masks? If you ask them, they'll tell you.
They'll tell you.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that disrespectful versus pushing back. We talked about how we talked about this a lot last week, how, our generation, we just kind of fell in love, was like, oh, this is what has historically been done. Okay, we're going to do it because this is what they told us we were supposed to do. Where this generation is like, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
I don't see the value. They don't have buy-in. Right. A lot of this traditional stuff. No. So parents, how do we, let's explain disrespectful versus pushing back to the importance of giving your child that safe space to share and to be able to, so that you can ask them those questions and they be honest with you.
Right. You have to change your philosophical view of who you see it. How do you see a child? Right? If you see a child as a human that has their own feelings and wants and needs, then you're going to be more apt to kind of create spaces to listen to them, even if you don't agree with them, just to listen. But then if your philosophical orientation is that children should be seen and not heard, then that's going to be hard. And what I was explaining to a group of leaders last week is sometimes we lead how we were parented. Mm-hmm. Do as I say. And you find leaders like that in schools. Then you find teachers like that, and then the behaviors start to uptake. Whereas, and kids pick up on that. Let's just be honest. Just because you're a teacher, an administrator, or leader, or whatever in a school district, does not mean you know how to establish a relationship with a child.
Yeah.
That we have got to take more intentional time around teaching people how to do that. Now, for some folks, that comes naturally, but for some people, they are just focused on the work. But our babies don't just listen to you because you're an expert. And I tell my graduate students this stuff. Just because you got all these degrees, if you don't have any street cred and you can't connect with them, you're just a person with a bunch of degrees sitting before them. They are not going to just listen to you just because. Then this is starting to translate over into the workforce. You know, these same kids are growing up and they have to feel that you really have a vested interest in them in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important to them even more so during our generation. So if you're a person who's not relational, right? You're a person who just do as I say, then how, you know, when students ask questions, when students push back, because we're teaching them to be critical thinkers, we should be, Allison, teaching them to be critical thinkers, push back respectfully. But when we are not teaching them that, I mean, and then we shun them to the side as if they're being disrespectful. Now, are some children being disrespectful? Absolutely. We know what that looks like. We clearly define what disrespect looks like. But for some, another group of kids, no, that's not disrespectful. That is just a kid critically thinking and asking questions of an adult because they don't quite understand or grasp what they're saying, or they may disagree. And that's still okay.
They're allowed to disagree. I mean, that's part of it is we're not just, I have had to tell kids so many times when they come in and complain about their teachers or about their coach, I'll say, you know, your teacher's a human being. They could be having a really bad day. Like, you don't know what's going on at home for them. You don't know if, you know, they are going through something really bad personally, who they've lost lately. I remind teenagers that all the time. And we also have to remind the adults, like, you don't know what's going on in these kids' lives and you don't know what's going on in their homes. And there have been so many times when I've had a teacher's come in complaining about a student and I'll say, well, here's what's going on at home. And here's what's, you know, here's a little glimpse into the context of how the student is acting in your class.
Absolutely.
The teachers are like, oh, well, I mean, I can give them a little more grace on that. Well, how about if we just do it to begin with? Like, let's just assume that we're all going through a whole lot at home, that things are not all on the surface of our face, that we have things that are troubling us. And I think that goes both ways. But I definitely think, I mean, one of the things that you learn about as a parent, if you are trying to be, you know, if you're paying attention, is that, you know, it's important for your children to see you acknowledge when you're wrong. It's important for your children to acknowledge, to see that you acknowledge when you behave badly, when you say the wrong thing, when you yell, when you shouldn't have yelled.
Yeah.
And I think that that's all part of this. And yeah, I think that we need to allow them to be able to say, wait, why are we doing this? And I had a student come in right before the break and she said, this is Tate. Why are we going mask optional when we come back? This seems kind of scary. Like, it seems like a lot of people are getting COVID in New York City, and I feel like they're going to get COVID here too. And I said, you know, that's a good question. I think that we'll probably be reevaluating that. Like, there will probably be some reevaluation. One of the reasons is that because she was saying last year we did go remote when we came back, and I said, well, you know, last year there wasn't a vaccine, so we were in a different place. But we will be reevaluating, and yeah, that might change, and it might not be the right thing to do, but we're all going to figure out what to do, and we're going to make sure we're as safe as possible. And yeah, but I didn't say, like, don't worry, you know, you're not the administrator, like, you don't get to have a say in here. And
absolutely. That was such a critical lesson I had to learn as a parent. For some reason, I didn't ever want my daughter to see me cry. And her teacher who passed away, she and I were very close. And I remember the day that her teacher passed away, Allison, I didn't even want to tell my daughter. And I just sat in the car and cried. And it was just something going on. And I had to get with myself and say, what is it that you're afraid of her seeing? And I didn't want her to see me almost like out of control or not, you know. But once I got over that, and I had to get over it like really quickly because I had to tell my daughter, we healed together, right? Yeah. And then she learned that mommy is not robotic. Mommy doesn't sometimes have it together. That's okay. We create a plan and we walk together. But if she had never seen that, right? It's beauty in the ashes. You have to go to the valley moments with your children. You have to feel comfortable there with them and join hands with them and bring them up out of it. You cannot act like it's not in existence. It's not there. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with you. We have a comment about the structure of the school system is do what I say, do it this way. Agreed. Like that is a big problem I have with our school system in general.
Absolutely.
It is a big problem. I think that's why it's important for parents to think about the way that they're parenting at home, because even if there are individuals in a school who are operating that way, that is the way that schools have operated. I think it's important to be able to, for somebody to acknowledge to kids that this is not, like, that's not actually, how things should run, and that they are valid. Somebody needs to be telling the kids they're valid. And somebody needs to be modeling it. And but I do agree with you. That's one of the problems. And it's just one of the things that I think we need to think about. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a professor at the University of South Carolina, and she teaches teachers. Like, she's a professor of teaching and in education. And she said one of the biggest things that she learned in her PhD program was about care, about the concept of care, and that you might feel like you are showing students how much you care,
Right.
but you're not on the side of the receiving end of that, and you don't know how it's being received. And
Absolutely.
so there's a whole and I forget this. She told me that there's a book and a person who's an expert on this, but there's a whole line of thinking about how we project caring and how that caring is received. And I think that should be a bigger part of education and a bigger part of educators' education, because
Absolutely.
that's what we're doing. I mean, if we're not doing that, if we're not connecting with the kids, then what are we doing? Like, what are we doing?
Because if there's professional development days, those are the types of things we should be focusing on. It should be like a requirement. I think about, I'm looking at, as a project management professional, I have to, in order to keep my certification, I have to do X amount of continuing ed classes. And so, like, I'm looking at, I'm down to 7 months. I got to get busy. There's guidelines around what.
There are a lot.
It can
guidelines. Yeah.
So,
right.
I don't understand why we don't have these type of professional development sessions as a requirement. It should be like categories. There must be these type of classes that's covered, or these topics or something like that.
I agree completely with you, Tamika. And that's something that we're talking about even in my district, is making professional learning more balanced, not just so heavily academic focused, but to, work on, have a series on building relationships with children, a series on taking care of your own mental health as a teacher or administrator, a series on, it has to be more robust, because we are getting students from schools, graduate schools or whatnot, who are coming into the field who don't have those skills yet. And that's okay. So it's incumbent upon the employer, the organization, to give that learning to them, to help coach them up to that. And so, as a person who is in leadership, we've had to take a hard look at ourselves as well, to say, hey, what are some other things that we could be providing teachers right along those lines, which you just mentioned? Yep.
Yeah, I like what Yetta said. She said we've used the love languages as a model in our school with staff, and I've done that with students in my class, and that was helpful. I've learned how students need their cup filled. I mean, that's a very simple example. Love languages is the fundamental premise of how love languages is constructed and how you use it. You can really apply that in every arena. I've even referenced it in leadership training.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, when it comes to being a leader and knowing how to communicate, you got to understand what those communication preferences are for that person, because what works for Jillian may not work for Allison. What motivates Jillian is not going to be the same thing that motivates Allison. And all those things impact how you engage with that person. But we're so quick to, hey, this is a one size fit all type of model. And it's time to really, really move away from that. We talked about disrupting the system last week. That gotta go.
Yeah. That's out. When we disrupt the system, it's first thing out. Yeah.
I know. But we got to do better. Not individuals. I'm reading what's in the chat.
This week I was able to model for my own child a little bit of this, which was my oldest son, he graduated from high school in 2020. He did not get his senior spring. He didn't have a prom. He didn't have graduation. He then, his entire freshman year of college was completely disrupted, and he ended up having a year off. He's not going back to college until January. So when he goes back to college at the end of January, assuming they don't go remote again, it will be the first time he's been in a classroom in 2 years. And
wow.
So everything in the meantime, he had trips planned, got canceled. He had jobs planned, got canceled, all for COVID. He's been in his room most of the past 2 years. And he was going to Ireland this week to meet up with his girlfriend, who is Irish. And when we were on our way to the airport, we found out his flight was canceled. Because everybody's flights are canceled this week, right? So we get to the airport, and he's very much an adult, and I'm very much, when you have 4 children, you are not a helicopter parent. Like, there's a lot of benign neglect going on in my house. Like, my youngest child is definitely raised by wolves at this point. So I'm not the kind that, gets his way, and he also really doesn't want me to. So I try to give him lots of space, and, I don't micromanage his packing or ask him if he has to code or ask him if he has his passport. Like, this is his problem. But I said, do you want me to come in the airport with you? Because he's never been through this before. And he was like, yeah, you probably should. I know you're going to watch anyway, that kind of thing. But you could tell he really wanted some backup. Yeah. And I ended up, having to do the whole plead with a gate agent and be like, please get him on a flight. Like, please, this child has had everything taken away from him for the past 2 years. I know that you're in chaos, but please. And he got to see me very polite and very diplomatic and very understanding that this is a horrible situation, and also very persistent and very relentless and very much like, please just don't say no. And I told him afterwards, I said, I know you think that I am a pain in the butt all the time and that I am relentless all the time, which I am. But there is a big difference between assertiveness and rudeness. And I wasn't rude at any point to anybody.
That's right.
Because I understand that we are all having a bad day. All of us at the airport is having a bad day. But I just, asked very politely for her to exhaust every option before she gave up. And I hoped he has a very hard time asserting himself. Like, he doesn't want to be rude, he doesn't want to be disrespectful, but he has a lot of opinions. And I hoped that he would absorb from that you do need to advocate for yourself. You do need to stand up for yourself. He did get to Ireland that day. Rude,
Yeah.
You can still treat people like human beings. Yeah. And I think that's where we are failing a lot in society right this second. And online and social media, there's that kind of thing. But I think that you have to give kids a space to push back and to say, I need something, or I don't understand why this is so, without saying, like, you're not supposed to ask for that. Like, you're not supposed to say that.
Right.
To keep asking to get on a flight.
When we do that, we're silencing their voice.
Yeah.
And that's the breeding ground. If you silence a child's voice, that's the breeding ground for abuse, even as an adult in a relationship. And that, so again, I'm always about what's underneath the stuff that we see. And so if I've never been encouraged to use my voice, if I've never been encouraged to push back in a respectful way and don't feel safe in doing so, like Allison, you created that safe space for him to see you do that. He learned something in that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the more confident that he becomes, that will help him in other areas of his life so that he won't be tolerant to people disrespecting him. Because there's something to be said about teaching our children how to advocate for themselves. That's a lesson.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's also about optimism, because if you have no hope that you're not going to be able to change your situation, or that you're not going to be able to speak up, that's when you lose hope. Like, that's when you start to think that, nothing matters.
Yeah, but the other part, I want to add to that too, because I think I want parents to make sure they heard what you said, but also visualize the demonstration of that learning opportunity. So you modeled, because they learned by what we model for them.
Absolutely.
You modeled how to handle a situation that you don't like, how to handle conflict in some instance, but also you modeled how to think critically, how to solve a problem. I mean, there were so many things that you can extract out of that we say this generation is lacking. Well, are you teaching it? Are you modeling it? Because if
Right.
you're not modeling it at home,
Absolutely.
how are they supposed to learn it?
Right.
And I never once asked to speak to the manager. I just want to make that very clear. No, there were no supervisors called in on my behalf. I mean, and I think that's very important. Like to say, I dealt with the other human being on the other side of the desk, you know, with my son right there, and said, I totally get it. Will you please look through and just make sure, like, is there anything I can do to help? Like, I will look things up at the same time. Like, what can we do? And to be fair, like, I also wrote a very glowing report to JetBlue on behalf of Tanya at the gate, who was amazing and also modeled right back at me for my child, thank God, respect and care. And she said, I want to help you. This is not what we're going to do. And she didn't leave her cool either, which is a miracle, because if I were in her position, I would want to die. But yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a great lesson for him.
Yeah. I'm like, but it's a great story, you know, because you don't think about it, but they don't necessarily get an Allison. How many
Allison didn't come out of the womb this way. Allison has learned. Like this is a result of a lot of learning, and you know. But I will say that I did have a mother who is exceedingly Southern and exceedingly nice. She went to Valdosta State and to Georgia Southern. She was Miss Valdosta State, I will have you know. And she has always been relentless. She does not give up, but she's always very sweet. In her old age, she's a little bit meaner, but she was always sweet growing up. So I did learn from her quite a bit. And I'm not taking credit for my own self, but this is a lot of learning and a lot of paying attention. So yeah, but yeah, not all of them have me. And I do get that. And I will tell you that I do try to model that in my office at school too. And when I talk to teenagers, even in interviews, I try to acknowledge like, that really stinks. Like, did you say something about that too? Like, did you bring that to somebody's attention? Like that you needed something in that moment that they didn't give you? And I try to always say that to the kids because you know, they'll say things to me that they won't say to their parents. And so I try not to let that opportunity go by because the kids we talked last week, kids need at least one adult in a school that they connect with.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And kids need their parents, but parents, you have to create that safe space because if they can't talk to you, where do they go?
Right.
And if they
find that person. Well, find somebody that they can go to, I'd say too. It's been important to me to find other adults that I can identify and say, if my kid comes to you, please, like, will you please be there for my kid?
Yeah, that's important. Network is important. Like to have a team in that community of people that your kid can kind of go to and talk to, because the reality is that they're not going to tell you everything. Sometimes they're not. But if they have a second adult, third adult that is trusted in this bit, like tapped by you with a wand, this is the person you go to, that's building that community. And I think also even in our education arena, we need to have more parenting classes, you know, for parents along these lines. Because again, everybody wasn't raised with a nice mom like your mom, Allison, or like my mom, who's very involved and is supportive to no end for her children. You know, everybody's doesn't have that. And so when I for example, I had a mom, she came into the central office, a couple months ago. She was super angry. I mean, y'all imagine 80 hot angry, like on 10, requesting to speak with someone, and they came and got me. And I'm like, okay, tell me what's going on. I like to know before I come to the front. Like I need to prepare myself.
Into the lion's den with
don't throw me out there like that. And so I get out there. This lady is probably like 4 feet tall, no lie, pregnant, upset because she perceives her kids to be getting bullied out of school. And what I explained to her is that, you know, her perception is, of course, her reality. But then we worked with her around her situation with her principal. Then I had to get my director of social work to talk to her about her behavior. Yes, you're upset. Yes, your kid was done wrong. All of those things are true. but what's another way that you can respond? And she has been so grateful around us giving her that coaching as a parent, because some folks have never been told, hey, coming up to the school and slamming stuff on the desk is going to make this worse. This is how you should approach that. And if this doesn't work, you go up the chain of command. And so, and she went up the chain of command, but the way she went up that command was, boy, I mean, hey.
Burning it down while she was going up, right?
Lighting the thing on fire. And then I left out the building after I met with her, and she circled back around and came to my car. And then, you know, that's how she is. And we've worked with her and have seen her behavior as a parent change, but we've been very intentional around coaching her on how to advocate for her child so as not to appear like this angry woman that's just losing her mind.
Yeah, because then what are we wondering why there is an increase in fighting in the schools? Like, the kids don't know how to handle
Absolutely
anger. And I get it. I have a lot of anger too sometimes, a lot. Like, ask me on any given day. But you can't just go launching it at the first person who comes through the door because they drew the short straw. They're Dr. Jillian that day and they got in front of you. Like, you can't just explode on people. And I think that's, the kids are exploding. And when they're little, they don't have a different way to explode. That's the way they explode. And, you know, sometimes they just need to punch something, but it should be a punching bag or a pillow, not a human. And but you have to show that to them. And I just feel like that's not what we're doing right now. And what we've done, like, I don't remember if it was Kenya or Yetta, but yes, what we said last week is true. This is what the whole story is about, is that we keep plowing forward saying, oh my God, we've lost so much time. We've got to keep going. We got to keep going. There's going to be standardized tests. Schools are going to get graded and our teachers are going to have their jobs on the line, as if we have other teachers to replace them with. We don't. Like, teachers are our most valuable resource right now, and they're in short supply, and they're all resigning. So we got to be careful about that, y'all. But, you know, we can't be so caught up in that we forget that these are children and that they don't care that you're behind in your lesson plan.
Yeah.
Like, they just need to learn how to be people first, and then they can learn. They can't learn when they're in chaos.
No, absolutely they can't. And when you talked about, I love that you took the time to coach that parent, because it made me think about that story I shared with you ladies on the story of the teacher on why she quit. And she quit because of the parents. It's not, and somebody else had commented, I think it was Yetta or somebody commented earlier, it's not the kids, it's the parents.
It is. It is. And I, just to be clear, I am a parent. I'm very empathetic to parents, and I feel like parents are doing their best.
Yeah.
But all the time. They're doing their best too. And I get it. That said, it is it is, because they don't always manage their emotions very well when
yeah, but but that's where the level of empathy, I think, also is required on all ends, because like you said, when you talk to the lady at JetBlue, I know you're having a horrible day. We're all stressed.
This is bad.
Parents, teachers, administrators, we're all stressed. We're all everybody's in survival mode.
Absolutely.
In survival mode, or even in fear mode, because we as people, our innate response is either going to be to fight,
there you go,
or we're going to freeze. Our natural human nature is going to do one of those three things.
Absolutely.
Some people are frozen in time right now, and they're struggling. They're suffering in silence. Other people are fighting because it's built up. So the first person they encounter, you're going to get all that pent up anger, frustration, confusion, and all those other emotions they don't know how to process, and they haven't had the window to process because they've been trying to keep food on the table, trying to keep a job, trying to keep their kids in school, trying to manage all these expectations. And then there are some who's just like, you know what, I just give up.
That's right.
So I want to flee from the situation. So that's where we have the increase in suicide attempts, or the increase in suicide. So everybody have to take a step back and do some self-reflection first with themselves. All right, how can I not add to the problem?
Absolutely.
We already have this volcano that's occurring, that has erupted.
Absolutely.
How do I not add to it?
Yeah, and it's really, the other day I had an encounter. I was thinking while you were talking, Allison, we went to get our PCR test to make sure we were good, and my daughter was indeed COVID free. Uh, and the young man at the CVS window, I don't know what kind of day he was having, but I could only imagine, right? I mean, after seeing so many noses, and I think, and I had to really like reset him in front of my daughter to let him know that we're really all in it together. But I had to say to him, tell him what my line of work was and what I do. And I understand it may be challenging. Now, he made the decision to switch out and pull somebody else to be at the thing because I think he had had enough. I think I had caught him at the end of his wits end. And quite frankly, I didn't even want him going up my nose or even giving me nothing to do with anything with my nose.
Because you was gonna get the angry squad.
And even though we had to do it ourselves, I just said let's get somebody else who's a little, because he was really upset. And so we all have to find time to take a step back to breathe, because when and this is something my mom and I noticed too, when I opened up the little box to put our nose test in and all that in there, girl, it was so full. And so that was indicative of probably his day. He needed a break, right? Here's one more nose that came up to the, and a matter of fact, it was 3 noses in our car and then a line of cars behind us. So he probably had it up. And so he took it out. He was trying to take it out on me. And I think I handled it appropriately. But within our own self-awareness, when do we realize we've had enough? When do we take a break? When do we say, today is a rough day. Let me just step back for a second. Can I have a moment? Let me go to the restroom. Can I, whatever I need to do, but we have to be able to articulate that because it is a lot that's going on to our brain. And I think someone mentioned it earlier. One of you guys said about decision fatigue. There's so many decisions people are being inundated with right now. Should I go to the Christmas party? Should I not? I I myself was supposed to go to a wedding out of town this weekend, and there's all this COVID, and you're having to think through things at a different level. And so it does affect your emotion, but sometimes you got to be more intentional about sitting with yourself, like getting with you and centering yourself every day, if not more so now than ever. We have got to recenter ourselves because you can feel yourself just floating away. I know one of my things that I do, and I don't know anybody else who may partake in this, but I have a weighted blanket.
Mm-hmm.
And it has become my best friend during the pandemic and the stress level of work and everything.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks have used weighted blankets in special education to deal with students when they're having sensory issues or whatnot. But over the years, it's become very popular with like folks who work in high stress jobs. I mean, so most of my division directors, I'm like, go home and get under your weighted blanket. They have gone out and got a weighted blanket. And we're like, oh my God, Yetta says she has one too. And
I'm thinking about my friend who's in behavioral, who's in this space. She has one, and I'm like, okay, all of us who don't have one, we're going to be going to Amazon.
They have them, and Target also sells them, just FYI. Target.
That has been my best thing, and that it centers you, and it keeps you, and that's one thing that you can do. But then also, for some people, it's prayer and meditation, those types of things. Oh, Yetta says get a 25-pound, right? She's going detail. She's like, don't get the. I know one of my directors got one that was way too heavy, and she was under it, like it was too weighted. I was like, I didn't say kill yourself.
Oh yeah, it feels like a hug.
No, you're not supposed to get it that heavy. But Yetta says it feels like a hug. It does, and it just settles you in. And so that's become a part of that pressure. That's become a part of my own wellness for myself, and for everybody. It's going to be different. But I've encouraged people during this time to come up with your own personal wellness plan. What is it for you that makes you come back to the middle? Knowing when you feel like you're floating like a balloon, like when you're not yourself. What are those signs, and how do you stop that and get yourself back on track? but that's a part of self-awareness, right? Like, when are we intentional about teaching our kids that, Allison, you know, like that self-awareness piece, knowing yourself first. We are so focused on getting to know other people that we forget that we're still a person. You're still valued. You got to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else out there.
That's why they say put oxygen masks on the adult before you put them on the child in the airplane, because if you are a hot mess, your kid can't not be a hot mess. And that I when I worked in the big public high school and saw what I saw in the student services office every day, I thought, these kids, when I talk to them, their parents are all hot messes. How do you expect your kid to not be a hot mess when at home it's a hot mess? You have to take care of yourself first. And one of the funny things about this year was I have a 9-year-old daughter. She is obsessed with those Pop It fidget toys that are like completely viral. And she has a TikTok channel where she unboxes them, like the whole 9 yards. So I thought at the beginning of the school year, I thought, I'm going to buy some of these for my office, for the kids who come into my office.
Absolutely.
While they're talking to me, because I think it might help them release it. But the thing is, the first person that came in was my co-counselor, the other counselor. And she came in and she's like, can I have this? Like, she wanted it for herself because
absolutely, Allison.
It's very therapeutic. And it is kind of therapeutic to pop them and make the little satisfying noise. It's like bubble wrap, but you know.
Absolutely. One thing that I did is the same thing, Allison. We're so much on the same page. In my office, I keep like stress balls. And so my directors come in and we sit and talk. I'm like, grab a ball, you know, and I have like soft music playing, and we're moving into a new building, which is stressful, but the goal that the movers have already come over the Christmas break, and my administrative assistant is like on it, like making sure they're putting our boxes in the right places. She called me today like she was on 10, but but we're gonna have like a peace corner in our division, and we had a space where people can go in there and kind of relax and things of that nature. But we have to be intentional. If we're saying we care for people and we want them to take care, what does that look like? Well, that looks like, in my space, we're gonna have a peace corner. In my space, it's an expectation that you eat lunch. Before we have a meeting, I'm always asking my staff, have you eaten today? And so I've asked them so much, Allison, that when we come together as a meeting, they're like, Dr. Whatley, I had a banana.
Had food. And I've gone to the potty. And
I've gone to the potty, right? And so, you know, we have to say those things, because sometimes as givers, as we all are, we'll just give until we have nothing
totally depleted
left to give. And we got to do better. And we have to hold each other accountable in that process.
No, absolutely. I went and pulled up, because we talked about this earlier, and we mentioned Allison, you said it, we're all grieving. And I was like, we all need to go through the 7 steps, 12 steps of grieving, because I remember when the pandemic started, I said something to the point around PTSD. It's like, we're all going to have some element of PTSD, and we are going to all need some type of therapy. But one of the steps they talk about is what we're talking about, scaling back your obligations temporarily and take time for you, because you have to grieve the process. And I think sometimes we feel that, especially as women, we're superwoman. So scaling back and taking time off and doing stuff for ourselves is not acceptable. And that was something I had to really work on this year. My team forced me to do it. And so one of the things I picked up, now I haven't done it since then, but I think I'm going to go get me a weighted blanket. And I'm gonna have a glass of wine, and I'm gonna pull my adult coloring book.
Yes,
I have those too.
I have my adult coloring books with all those funny, colorful words. And I didn't, until I did it, I was like, wow, this is really just calming. And
girl,
have some candles. And
Tamika, while you're talking, I'm going into my whole zone here. Like, I'm like, Lord, I'm looking at my weighted blanket right now.
Well, you know what? The other thing I'm going to do, because I am a kid at heart, I thought about it earlier. I'm going to pull that. I have a little joystick. I bought it years ago. I can't tell you the last time I played it, but it has Miss Pac-Man on there and Donkey Kong. So, you know, I'm telling our age, all those old games that we started out with. I'm going to plug it up to the TV before this weekend, and I'm going to play me some games. Probably
Yeah.
wrapping my. I don't know if I can do it in the weighted blanket, but I'm
You
going
can,
to try some new things
I
before
don't
this
know.
weekend.
Look, Allison.
You don't do all the forms of self-care at the same time because that doesn't work. Like you
You're overwhelmed.
drinking, popping, weighted blanketing, and playing Pac-Man at the same time. But you know, whatever like works in the moment is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, and I do think that there's this feeling after having been locked down and in quarantine. And again, a lot of people have spent the holidays in isolation. There's this feeling of the minute you get released, like you need to do all the things and, you know, all the lost time. There's so much lost time. And I think that one concept that we need to drill into ourselves and the kids, because the kids need to hear it from us, is that we are under no obligation to replace the lost time. We can't replace the lost time. We have to do the best we can, but you're not doing anybody any favors by running all of ourselves into the ground. Like you
At
can't.
all. At all. You're right, Allison. Literally
Not-
taking it taking it one day at a time, one moment at a time, and giving yourself permission to deep breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I look at some people and they're not breathing deeply. They're shallow breathing. And when you don't get great oxygen to your brain, you can't think well either. You know, you're depriving yourself of oxygen to your brain because you're shallow breathing. You know, so I have a whole thing I take my directors through when they come into my office, and they've gotten used to it. They used to be like, because sometimes you want to get in and get straight to the work, but you have to center yourself and center that. I know, Tamika, because I don't know what they've been through during their day, right? What they've heard in their day, what's going on in their departments. And so it's my job. I just take a personal responsibility to make sure they're okay first. It is so important for me. I have made all of them get weighted blankets. And it's so funny. And a little lavender. And I give them little treats throughout the year. So, and they work hard, but you know, I don't want them to ever feel like the stress is coming from me. I'm here to support and coach you as a leader. But then I'm also, and hold you accountable, but in doing so, I can also love on you. I can also encourage you to take care of yourself, because we don't get those messages enough as women either. You know, I mean, we got to get back on the pond. You have a baby, you go out there, you have a child, you come right back to work, and you're supposed to be perfect. I remember my male supervisor years ago, after I had Nuri, asked me when I came back to work after my maternity leave, he said, "Well, Jill, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel?" I said, like a 2 or a 1.
Like I've been hit by a bus.
Like,
Yeah.
what kind of question, you know what I mean? And in that space, I was just like, wow. Because how do you think I felt, right? Like I just gave birth to a whole 8.3 pound child. And so,
yeah,
right. So, yeah.
I think another thing we can also do that's helpful, and I said that I needed to do this probably 3 weeks ago. and it was one of the stages or one of the steps they listed. Have a good cry.
Oh,
I think we've kind of, sometimes in some spaces it's kind of taboo. Showing emotion, crying, no, that's a sign of weakness. When I've done it in the past, it's very cleansing, it's very cathartic, it's very healing, and it's very necessary. So I want to, can we talk a little bit about that? I know we've gone over, but I think that all that anger that we're seeing is because we got all this pent up anger and energy and emotions. We've had so much loss. We're not addressing it.
absolutely.
We got to keep moving. And so we haven't even processed and grieved it. And
Absolutely.
part of that is we haven't shown emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have to cry once a week. I'm going to be honest about that. Like I've been like that for a long time because otherwise it'll just build up. And so I think my good cry came 2 days ago. just to let it all out and then reset myself. But I'm very okay with that. And I'm self-aware and I'm honest about the feelings. I mean, how can you not cry when your child has COVID? Like if, how when you see your baby sick, so if I feel like crying in that moment, I give myself permission to be that. And it's so freeing. And it relieves my stress for me.
Yeah, I have no problem crying in front of my children. My 9-year-old, we don't always read before bed now. We watch TikToks, no judging. And
oh, my daughter loves it.
And she'll be like, "Are you gonna cry again?" Because on my TikTok algorithm, I have quite a bit of emotional content. And yeah, I probably will cry because I have a lot of military reunions on my TikTok for some reason. I have a lot of weddings and engagements and proposals and stepchildren or children asking their step parents to walk them down the aisle, like things that make me cry. And one of the things that made me cry a lot during the pandemic, and I haven't seen a lot of it lately, but I'm sure I would cry. I have a hair trigger on the crying, is when the vaccines first came out, there was a TikTok trend to videotape yourself getting the vaccine and then do a very fast, like as if you can see the inside of their brain, like all the things they miss, all the moments they miss and the people they've missed from the pandemic, like all flashing through their brain while they're getting the vaccine, and like that hope that maybe things are going to come back and that you're going to have normal life come back a little bit. Like that is what really makes me break down. Like it's that feeling of everything we've lost, everything we miss, the people we miss, people who are gone. Like we lost time with our loved ones that we couldn't see during the pandemic. That, I mean, you won't have that. And that's when you allow yourself to feel the full depth of that loss.
Yes.
That is really cathartic. And you have to do it because like with grief, you can't skip steps. You have to walk through every step. Otherwise, you're not okay. And with this, I think it's really, really important to feel the grief and to feel every bit of it every once in a while, at least. I mean, we can't do that every minute of the day or we aren't going to.
Absolutely.
But you have to.
I mean, you have to. I don't see how. I remember a situation when the pandemic first started in March of 2020. Mm-hmm. And I went to a Publix and I had my mask on, I had my gloves on. At that time, you were masking and gloving. And then
you were coming with that full hand sanitizer spray in front of you. Yes.
I was like, what's going on? And then, so I got out the car, went in, and I'm just grocery shopping as I would have before, getting multiple meats. And this is when they were telling you, don't get the multiple meats, but my brain had not shifted. So when I get to the checkout line, the manager comes to me and says, "Ma'am, you can only get 1 rice, 1 pack of chicken," which is not large. And like he took some of my stuff away. And when I got in the car, I cried. I just cried. And I was crying and I didn't know which hand had been touching what. So I had to take the gloves off. I was just a mess. But that was a moment. I needed that moment, right? I don't even know which hand I'm supposed to use. And I just remember after I let it all out, it felt so much better. But here's the thing. I cannot go to that Publix anymore. That Publix means something to me. It serves as a minor trigger at the beginning of the pandemic, but I go to the other Publix, so I didn't allow it to generalize to other Publix.
You cannot taint all the Publixes. Like you need Publixes. You can't live without Publix.
I can't live without Publix. I love their cookies. And so, but I needed to have that. And I had to, and that moment for me will always stick out as a crucible moment for me, a life-changing experience where I had to let go of something when I cried, let go of whatever I was holding on to, because we were at that time in a state of real crisis because we'd never been through a pandemic. And I was still getting 4 and 5 packs of chicken. I didn't know, my mind, listen, but I had my gloves on and my mask. And so, how many of us are still trying to make things like we talked about earlier, the way they were, grieve the way it was, and get real with the way it is. I'm going to say that again. Grieve the way it was and get real with the way it is. And we got to do that. Otherwise, this is when you're going to see the anger. This is when you see super anxiety. This is when you see a lot of depression, because what depression is doing is what? It's keeping you focused on what was once, and that's no more. Anxiety is making you feel anxious about what will happen that you really can't control. You know, and so those thought patterns, we have to put them in perspective and get them in control. So for me, what has helped is to be able to grieve what I lost. I got to grieve that, and I got to put that somewhere. And you can't put it here. You can't put it here. You have to release it into the atmosphere.
And you have to let kids grieve without trying to fix them, because I said this last week, like when I was interviewing students for my story and I asked them, what can your parents do to help you? They said over and over again, I just want them to listen. I don't want them to try and fix it. And the truth is, we can't fix it. Like they know we can't make it better. And what I told my friends about my experience this week with the canceled flight is that I haven't been able to fix anything for 2 years for this kid. I can't fix what he has gone through at all. I fixed the canceled flight, and that made me feel better. And I had a good cry after that, because
I know you did
something. But at the same time, it's just also a reminder that I can't fix most things, and that there are going to be flights canceled. There are going to be disruptions in his life going forward. School is going to be disrupted, apparently, because we're going to keep letting this go around and around, and it's going to become so taxing on human functions. We're not going to be able to make school go the way we want it to go. But they have to be able to tell you that they're upset and they are sad and they have lost something and that it hurts, and you can't just jump into fix it mode. And that's really hard as a parent, because you just want to fix it and you don't want to see your kids hurt, but everybody is hurting. And that's our lives. Like, that's all of our lives. And some kids were hurting before this, and people have food insecurity and housing insecurity and so much going on all the time. And for some kids, this isn't all that different than what they were experiencing before. They were experiencing so much doubt and insecurity about their own safety before. It's just that it's so much more widespread now. And so everyone has a short rope. And so I think that for parents, big takeaways are: take care of yourself first, because you cannot be a good parent for your kid if you're not taking care of yourself. And secondly, like, the kids don't need you to fix it. They need you to sit with them and let them grieve and let them be sad.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
And there's power in saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is, or I don't know what's going to happen, but I know we're going to be okay, because we're going to do this together, and we have the resources to be okay. Like, we're going to be okay.
We're going to be okay. Yeah,
absolutely. And and parents, to add to that, just know that you're not alone, and don't try to do it alone. There are resources, and saying that you don't know, we're going to be okay. That's what your kids want to hear.
Yeah.
And then you can add, we're going to figure it out together. We're going to find that resource. So don't be afraid to reach out. Reach out, and we were joking last week. Reach out and touch somebody's hand. Reach out to somebody, but reach out to a good, credible source. You can't go to everybody. You don't want nobody who's more cuckoo than you are. But
and they're out there. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of them.
A lot of them. They're talking a lot. Like, they've got a lot to say. So you got to be careful about that. But yeah, that's true. There is, you're not alone. Like, I have to talk to parents all the time about, they'll come and say, my kid is anxious. Their grades are failing. And I'm like, a lot of them are. And they're like, really? It's not just my kid? No, it's never just your kid. It's really never just your kid. It's a lot of kids. And that's, when my kids were smaller, I'm not going to name names, but one of them had a bedwetting issue. Could have been any of them, not going to say which one it was. But I am a pretty open person, and I made some offhand remark, and other parents came up to me and they're like, wait, you're going through that too? Like, your kid, like, nobody talks about this. Like, yeah, I know. We don't all, I mean, you just have to know that you're not alone and there are resources out there.
That's right.
You can reach for them, but you're never alone. It's never just you, and it's never just your kid. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
And
So,
for kids, kids need to hear that too. They really all believe that they're the only one who have ever gone through this before. And that's part of being a teenager is, that kind of self-absorption, which is totally healthy. But, they do need to hear no, other kids are
absolutely.
It's all happening.
Yeah. So, I mean, we shared a lot of great information. So I hope you can walk away with those key takeaways. And the other part of that is, remember, parents, what you model is what they're going to follow. Mm-hmm. So these tips, these takeaways is so you can be a better model so that you can help them process this abnormal situation we're faced with. But their ability to process it is a direct indicator on how well they're going to be able to overcome it.
Right.
So you have to be able to demonstrate it well for them. And if you can't, partner with someone to help demonstrate and model how they should process it, how they can talk about it, how it's okay to cry, and all those things. That's going to be better on the other side of this pandemic. Because the way you parented before the pandemic, there must be a shift. I was about to say there should be. There must be a shift in how you parent them post-pandemic, because the needs are different now. The needs are greater now, and you have to look at this from a different lens. But that's going to require you to be open and be willing to acknowledge that there is a problem. There's adjustment that needs to be made, and you got to have the willingness to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's no shame in not knowing what to do. There's no shame in not knowing what to do or what to say, because nobody has been through this. So
that is so true, Allison.
Yeah.
We're literally all in it together, and we learn something new every day.
We've all been pushed out of the plane, and we all are building our wings on the way down to keep from crashing.
Yes. And we have good days and bad days. I mean, I had a good moment with the JetBlue counter, but I could have had a bad moment. Like, it could have gone either way. And I mean, that's the thing is, like, I think that parents feel a lot of my worst parenting moments have come out of moments where I felt like embarrassed or felt like I was going to be judged as a parent. And I think that you have to let go of that, because there is no shame in not knowing what to do.
Brene Brown.
Yes. Yes. And one of my favorites is Kelly Corrigan too. I love her. And she wrote a book called Tell Me More. And one of her things is the power of saying, I don't know, and like pausing and saying, I don't know. Like, that's okay. And around shame, there's like so many people who have so many good things to say about these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I learned from them. See, because you can learn from other people.
We're still learning.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long learning. Still learning, and we're okay with that. Like, just don't have. I think some of us thought maybe before the pandemic, we had some things together, but you had to pivot. I'm like, wait a minute, okay, yeah, I
had nothing together. Just to be clear, like,
no, I don't think I did, but I think some people may perceive that from some of us. And I remember when someone called me in a panic as a parent, and I was like, girl, I'm struggling too. She's like, you're struggling? I was like, I'm struggling. This is a lot.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna let you. Yeah, I'm honest. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I had to buy my daughter a desk. I had to get her office, like the Zooming, and it was just a lot. I was like, oh my goodness, then you got to work. Yeah, that was a lot. Yes. And she was like,
yes.
She that made her feel better though, Allison. So we, even as leaders and as people in our positions, people see us. That's their perception. But we got to be honest when we feel like, the walls are caving in even on us. I mean, and when we've had to pivot and how that makes us feel, and that's why I felt so compelled tonight to say, yeah, I cried because my daughter had COVID. I'm a human being. I'm a mom. I have the same emotions. Take away the doctor and all that jazz. Look, I'm a human. I still cry, bleed, and sweat, and get nervous just like any other mom out there. And it's okay for me to be that way. And we're fine, you know, and she's negative.
And she's negative now. She's got a negative test. No,
she got a negative test, and her mom had to have a strict conversation with the COVID man at the window because he was losing his mind.
That's awesome. It is true. And I mean, like, I have 4 kids. The 4 kids reacted in 4 different ways to this pandemic. All 4 were valid. I had to, you know, I was very open. I had one child who completely shut down and could not do online learning at all and literally never logged in and just failed everything. And I said to my friends, yeah, he sure did. Because you know what? What am I going to do? Like, that's his reaction. And, you know, is it the best? No. Did his school handle things as well as they could have? No. Nobody in this scenario was handling it well. Oh, well, it's a pandemic. Pandemic rules. Like, here we go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. At some point, you have to let yourself off the hook and just kind of float with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And parents, and then giving your kids that room, because I just think about some of my scholars. Yeah, it's like really what matters right now. I'm more concerned
all that matters is if you come out alive. Like, that's I tell the teenagers every day, if you survive a pandemic, survive the pandemic. Like, we're gonna be okay. I'm not so worried about whether or not you failed graphic design electives this semester. I'm more concerned about, like, where are you in here? Like, where are we? And are we doing okay? Because
exactly.
Here it comes again. Like, we got another surge. We got to buckle down and bear through this. And I mean, long game, y'all. We have perspective that this is not the end of their road. And they really do believe that getting into college is like the end of, like, that's the end. And I'm like, that's the beginning. Like, that's the wedding. You've got a marriage after that. You don't have, like, this is not, and also you only get to be a teenager once, and they've had a really crappy teenager. So, like, let's just do this the best way we can. So,
absolutely. And support each other the best way we can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that part. That part. Well, this is our way of trying to help provide support through the wealth of information. And we want you to take this. We want you to share it. Comment, send us messages. Feel free to inbox us. How did this help you? What were some of your key takeaways? Any transformational moments? Was there something said that was like a aha moment, or hey, you know what, that right there is the one thing I'm going to start with? Because like you just told me with self-care, you can't do all of it at once. So we don't want you to, the intent of this was not to overwhelm you in any shape, form, or fashion. So take all the information, digest it, process it, but pick one thing. Start with one thing.
Yeah.
Just start with one.
That's right.
Pick one, start with that you're going to implement to evoke that change as we get ready to go into a new year. That's why we made the sacrifice to do this before the year ended, because we wanted to equip families with tips, with knowledge to help you leave some stuff in 2021 and move into 2022 stronger, better, more empowered, more knowledgeable on how to be a better you as a parent. So you could be a better you for your child. Your child could be a better them. The teacher, as a teacher, you could be a better teacher, a better administrator, and the list goes on.
Miss Ruby is asking for part 3.
Oh my goodness. You're gonna have to give part 3, honey. I don't know. Miss Ruby is your fan.
Next week we'll have our mothers on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, that was funny. That threw me. That threw me. Like, when is part 3? Well, Miss Ruby and others who's asking the same question, we'll go and have a conversation about this. And we'll let you know. But no, we definitely want you to at least before this year closes out, pick one thing.
That's right.
Pick one thing.
And start a conversation with the teenager, maybe.
Start a conversation with the teenager, but I'm gonna add something to that, Allison. Don't dominate the conversation. Start the conversation and just sit and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And remember what I said about listening last week. I teach this to my leaders in active communication. The key to listening is rearranging those words and learning how to be silent.
Yeah.
So being silent, because our kids give us feedback. Well, mom and dad, they're always on their devices. Put the devices up. Turn off the TV. Remove every distraction. Start the conversation and sit there and just listen.
That's right.
Give them true safe space.
That's right.
That's what they're hungry for. That's what they're looking for. That's what they desire.
Absolutely. You're right.
Yeah. Active listening.
Active listening.
Yeah.
So, wow, ladies, we've gone an hour and 45 minutes.
Allison, I didn't even realize that.
I know. I think last week was about close to an hour and a half. I know it's good. It's so necessary, but
there's a lot of parts to this. There's a lot of moving parts.
And we tried to unpack a lot in a short amount of time. So share it and give us your comments. So closing remarks, I'm just gonna say, everyone stay safe. I want you to mask up, but I'm just gonna say you do what you feel is necessary. Stay safe and have a happy, safe new year. Allison, Dr. Jillian, I'll let you two have the last closing remarks.
Yeah, I would say to take care of yourselves and to just be really, give yourself permission to not take everything in all at the same time, and to take it one step at a time, and to encourage those around you to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and same. I want to echo what you all have said. It's all about taking care of you. Take care of you, and once you're okay, the kids will be okay. My mom has always said that, and I truly believe that the better we are as parents and continue to open ourselves up to learning different ways and putting more tools in our toolbox, the better off our children will be. So be well and be safe.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, you heard it. So until next time, hey, Happy New Year. Remember, the time to be ready is not the time to get ready. Let's learn how to stay ready. But we want to stay ready emotionally, socially, physically as well. All right, Tamika Williamson, College Prep Boss signing off. See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.